Et super. Bonjour à tous et ben on va démarrer. Welcome everybody. We're going to start. It's 6 p.m. and that's the target time to start. Super, bienvenue à tous. Bonne année. Salut à tous. Ça va bien? Ouais, super, cool. Merci d'être venus aussi nombreux. Thank you for coming, for being so many to come tonight. We don't know if it's because it's Lightspeed or because it's our presenters. I hope it's for our presenters that you're coming so many. Oh, for the pizza, yeah. Obviously. Hospitalité aussi. Yeah, there are so many reasons to come, to go out in the snow at -10. But yeah, still, super appreciated. Thank you very much. Merci à tous. Ok, so before starting the presentation, avant qu'on commence les présentations, on va vous parler un petit peu de nous. We're going to introduce the Java user group. For those of you who are new, hey, by the way, who is new to the Java user group tonight? All right, hey, welcome. Thank you for coming. Super appreciated. Okay, so who we are? We are on OBNL. And there are some, Romain is here with us tonight. He's going to record for the second time. So if you are not yet subscribed to our YouTube, just scan this QR code and you will see that now we have a YouTube presence. And thanks to Romain, actually, we record the presentations for the second time. The first time was in December. Donc là, on continue au mois de janvier. On va essayer de le faire à chaque fois, tant que les présentateurs sont OK avec. Il y a moi, il y a Ludovic qui est là. Salut Ludovic. Et Félix, il est passé où? Il est là. Hello Félix. Marion, elle n'a pas pu venir ce soir. On organise aussi le Devoxer Kids. Je vais en parler un petit peu après. First of all, thank you very much for hosting us, Lightspeed. It's really appreciated to be there. It's the first time that we organize a jug here. I have already been to several CNCF Montreal meetups here in Lightspeed, and then I contacted you, Pavel, and you were so welcoming and nice to accept us tonight. Merci beaucoup, Pavel. Merci à Lightspeed. D'ailleurs, en parlant de Lightspeed, talking about Lightspeed, do you want to share a few words with us, Pavel?
Sure.
Merci.
Hi, everybody. So I joined Lightspeed 4 years ago. At that time, we were like few developers, like maybe 5 developers, but since then we grew out to around 30 and we're still growing. And Java is a big part of Lightspeed hospitality. Lightspeed has 3 main products and hospitality is heavily rely on Java. So yeah, and we're still growing, so check out our job postings if you're interested. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, super. Super, thank you, Pavel. And thanks again for organizing the meetup with us tonight. Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. And also, Romain. So, Romain, still you. Encore toi, Romain. Tu nous as fait un joli Linktree. Je ne sais pas si vous connaissez Linktree. Eh ben, là, on l'a associé au code QR. Et puis, c'est une toute petite page avec plein d'informations sur qui on est et qu'est-ce qu'on fait et qu'est-ce qu'on organise. Donc, c'est ça. Vous avez le lien pour nous rejoindre sur Slack. Le Slack est vivant. And yeah, and then also information about Devoxer Kids as well. But yeah, if you want to know anything about us, in this QR code, we try to share the most. Super. So talking about hosting us, if you are working in an office in Montreal, well located, please, downtown, then yeah, we're super interested to be in contact with you, and we could actually bring our community to you to host an event exactly like this one. You can contact us via, once again, the Linktree QR code. Cool. So yeah, I told you about Devoxer Kids. So December 6th was the last one, but actually there's a new one coming up in March, on March 21st. Il y a le prochain événement Devoxer Kids qui arrive le 21 mars. Alors, c'est pas encore officiellement annoncé, mais ça va être la prochaine date. Qu'est-ce que c'est Devoxer Kids? Devoxer Kids, ce sont des ateliers pour enfants de 5 à 14 ans. Donc ça, on est aussi une équipe de bénévoles, un peu plus que du Jug. Et puis c'est ça. Ça va être organisé chez Intact Assurance au centre-ville. Et puis c'est ça. Donc vous pouvez encore une fois avoir toutes les infos sur le code QR si vous avez des enfants sur cette tranche d'âge ou si vous en connaissez. Et n'hésitez pas, dès que vous êtes inscrit sur la mailing list de Devoxer Kids, il faut aller très très vite parce que les places partent en quelques dizaines d'heures. Donc ouais, en 2-3 jours, c'est plié en général. C'est très très populaire. Donc 21 mars pour le prochain. Ok, on a parlé du hosting. We talked about hosting, and we're also still looking for presenters. So yeah, just make sure you can reach us out on Slack or via email. Once again, you can scan the QR code. I'm gonna stop saying this. Okay, that should be fine. Yeah, just if you're interested to present whatever you're working on, just please reach out to us. Et si aussi vous voulez être un volontaire, un bénévole pour le Jug ou Devox Orchids, on a toujours besoin d'aide, on serait super content de vous avoir. Alors ce soir, qu'est-ce qu'il y a à gagner dans le jeu concours quiz? Il y a 2 licences pour sûr, peut-être plus que ça, mais il y aura moins de licences. La manière dont on fait notre jeu, notre quiz en général, on joue un peu avec vous et on pose des questions pour voir si vous avez suivi. So usually we have a raffle at the end of the event, and the way that we do the raffle is basically we ask few questions. It's a quiz like Kahoot or whatever. And then, yeah, you need to be first, and usually the questions are about the presentation. So please don't fall asleep tonight if you want to win a license. Talking about the next events in Montreal, there was J Champions Conf this week. Who was there? I mean, it was virtual. Yeah, Ken, obviously. Who else? You haven't seen any talks? Anyways, it's on YouTube. Just type J Champions Conference. This is crazy. The content that they had, it was huge. Like everything Java was discussed there. So it was from last week until Tuesday this week.
Can I add something here?
Yeah.
My name is Ken Fogel. I'm the organizer of the J Champions Conference. Go to the YouTube channel. There's over 160 one-hour videos on a whole range of topics relating to Java development. We had a great time over the 4 days. It just ended on Tuesday. And those videos from the last 60 years are going to be there till the end of time. J Champions Conference.
Yes, thank you, Ken. 160 vidéos, c'est malade. J'en ai vu quelques-unes. C'est un excellent contenu. Vous trouverez votre bonheur, c'est sûr. On aime aussi parler de Kung Fu. C'est nos amis. Yann, il n'est pas là, peut-être. Non, je ne l'ai pas vu. So Kung Fu is going to happen at the end of the month. It's a 3 days conference and 2 days workshop. Who's going? I'm going at Kung Fu. Yeah, yeah. A few hands raised. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, you won. Yeah, nice. All right. So yeah, see you there. Java 26, 17 mars. Okay, yeah, but actually for Kung Fu, something that I failed to mention yet is that the next Java user group is going to happen inside Kung Fu. It's going to be on, well, actually, yeah, this is what we have here. So the day before Kung Fu, so Tuesday the 24th, there are going to be many meetups presenting at Kung Fu, including Java user group, CNCF Montreal, CTO Montreal, and I've heard another one actually. Yeah, your user group, Farid, Gen AI, Montreal. So yeah, 4 meetups, same location. It's free. It's downtown Bonaventure Hotel. Yeah, don't miss that. That's gonna be big. Okay, super. I think we can start the presentation now. I hope I didn't bore you too much. And Pavel, it's up to you to present your talk. Merci encore pour votre présence et bonne soirée. Salut.
Hi again. So I'm going to talk about API development and our experience, how we shifted from code first to design first, and all the benefits we discovered and we're still discovering them. And let's start. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why REST needs open API, then the 3 stages of how you start with using open API, then why design first is amazing, and some tips on organizational adoption. I keep hearing it everywhere that REST is easy, CRUD is easy, creating like CRUD service, super easy. It relies on HTTP, you have get, post, delete, and then it perfectly aligns with CRUD. What can be easier? And then if you create a REST service for some front-end feature, you just write in Slack to your front-end developers, here is the endpoint, here is the payload, username, full name, and that's enough to start to work with. But then actually it's not that easy, because later on you'll start to have questions like, and it's pretty common, like for the username, can it be like 2 letters? Can it be 1 letter? Can it be like 150 letters? What about spaces? Like here we had engineer. Is it like enough? Is it a free text or it's enum? All fields required. What if the user which is being created is not yet born? Can the date of birth be in the future? And those questions, there are lots of them. This is just one example. And then another problem is starting with designing REST endpoints. And like some of them are pretty straightforward. Like if you want to delete a user, it's usually users and user ID. But what if you want, because we don't delete stuff anymore, what if you want to archive a user? Should you just do the same endpoint with a query parameter, like soft delete? Should you put a new user with an updated status? So let's say that the user has that field in the body. Should it be put on the user ID / status with a new status? This is partial update, so it's probably a patch. And this is pretty standard. Merge patch. But maybe then you can just provide an operation and call a post on the user ID with a verb archive. But then there is a better approach, like a Google style. They do it in most of their APIs. So for the calls which are not perfectly aligned with CRUD, they put colon and then they provide a verb, like what you can do with that resource. But then there is actually a better way. There is a JSON patch, which has some standards, and it's used like this. So there are many ways, and the main thing is it's not straightforward. Like even on the backend, when you just start to think about how to design it, it's not straightforward. And then you have more questions, and I think if you work with REST, if you build those REST services, there are lots of different questions for bulk operations, for filtering and paginating. Like you can implement filtering and paginating in one service, but how to make it a standard for all the services, and so on and so forth. So many non-standard decisions to make. And it's perfectly okay with, like, REST allows it. Like I feel like REST is a range. So some services can be fully RESTful. Some of them can be not RESTful at all, and then it becomes JSON over HTTP. Like in old days, you could find lots of long threads on Stack Overflow about like how to make this more RESTful. But the core problem is there is nothing built in REST which will allow discoverability like in GraphQL. There is no built-in way to communicate the contract. You can just try to call few services. You get some feeling of like what fields you have, but that's it. Well, and then OpenAPI specification comes to rescue you because it's YAML, which describes the endpoint, the DTOs, and for the example above, for the user, this is the example of the DTO, and then from here you just see like all the required fields, you see the requirements for the username, and so on and so forth. So there is nothing to discuss about. You just provide it to your clients, and that's all clear. But then with OpenAPI, there is another problem comes, like how to work with it. And I find that there is like 3 stages of how we can work with it. And the simple one is just manual documentation. So developer implements the code, and then from time to time, he will go and update documentation. This is not part of the process. And the problem, like it's pretty simple. Like you don't need any tooling for that. You just write your implementation, write your controllers, and then you go and update, create the OpenAPI spec in YAML. But that's YAML, like there are like you need to count spaces and all that. That's we don't like that. So in most of the cases, the API is outdated. And then if you don't trust, like you try to call one endpoint, the documentation is outdated. You don't have any trust in everything else what's there. So it's kind of useless. But it's good for APIs which are not updated. So that may be the only reason to use it. The next thing is the code first. This is automatically, the way it works, you provide annotations on the controllers, you provide annotations on the DTOs, and then like a Swagger doc or some other framework will generate you OpenAPI based on that. And this is just a quick example how it looks like. So you have a controller, and then you have all these annotations mapped there. And the same for DTO. And also you provide regex rule, size, and etc., whatever you have in the JavaX validation. So that works well. But then the problem is, like, the docs always match the code. It's easy to adopt. It's all Java. You don't need to count spaces in YAML. But then the problem, like, one problem is, like, in this code first example, there are just 2 lines of business logic of the controller at the very bottom. And then you have all this mess. And it's also, you write logic, and then you need to update documentation, and also documentation stays not updated. There is no way to review API, and there is no way to design it properly. And then, like, one of the problems, you can introduce breaking changes. You just go change the type, and that's it. The API is broken. So then, what if we can, instead of generating OpenAPI from code, we generate code from OpenAPI? The process is quite straightforward. You design YAML manually. You can review and collaborate on that. Then you generate service interfaces and DTOs, and then you implement the server logic. So that's much better, and I'll try to prove it to you now with lots of benefits, and just to show the way how it works. Since we talk about Java, it's done with a Maven OpenAPI generator Maven plugin. So you just add it to your POM.xml. You provide path to the OpenAPI. You do some configurations here, and at the end you will have generated interface. The interface will have all the needed annotation, and it will have Java doc, which is quite important. And that's basically it. So then the only thing you need to do is just to go and create your implementation. You create controller, you implement it. You have clear separation between contract and the implementation. And yeah, that works. And then there are a few other things, like if you want to add a lombok, it's fully extendable. You can add like lots of different stuff. You can add custom annotations. And that's basically it. So the process is create API spec, and then the code is generated. That works well. So what can we do with that? Like, now we know that we have a single source of truth, and what benefits we have. One of them is you can early design your contracts. I think the proper way to use it, create a GitHub pull request, drop YAML there, and then start to discuss with your clients, with front-end developers, like, is it what they wanted? Like, do they have all the fields they need? And even better way is to tell your client to design the DTOs and endpoints for you. So they know what they want, and you know how to provide it. And then you have design review. You can have back and forth with them. So it's much better than you just, after you implemented the endpoint, you just drop them the link saying that this is the endpoint, it's ready. And all the stakeholders can comment there. And you can also catch some issues quite early in the process. Another benefit is static mocks, or just mocks in general. So you have contract defined, and the front end or client can already work with that because they can create mocks. And then one thing, like if we have controller, and instead of returning some value, we can just quickly just draft something here and already provide in this case, pet read DTO. So they can already start to work with that. And even better, you can use mock server, like your client can use mock server. So you just provide the OpenAPI link, and that's it. In this case, Prism CLI will put some dummy data into the DTOs, into the fields, so they can already have something to work with while you implement the backend logic. The next cool thing, which similar to what I just showed, is the parallel development. So we can work backend and frontend at the same time. And then you can have like some sync up meetings and just to verify that all goes well. And that significantly increases the development time. Decreases. Yeah. And then you can integrate from time to time, like endpoint by endpoint or DTO by DTO. This is pretty big. This is quite amazing. You have 0 breaking changes. Because if you think about it, you have open API YAML defined. If you change something there, if you change the type of the field, your build just fails because you have controller implementations, interface has changed, it doesn't build. So you cannot build that. This is the first level. The second level, even if you intended to break it, you can enable breaking changes detection in CI, and that's pretty straightforward. You take the latest open API YAML from main, from the main branch, and then you compare it with what you currently have in your branch. And there are tools for that. We're using OAuth diff, and then it just fails the build, and it tells the developer that you have breaking changes. And the breaking changes, it can be anything like different field type, removed endpoints, removed parameters, something which is truly breaking. And the results for that, yeah, you don't have breaking changes, you don't have like clients who are complaining or the front end which doesn't work. This is a huge benefit. You can also enforce common standards across your APIs by, like, for example, in our case, we use Spectral. It links the open API, and you can also provide some configuration that, for example, you want to have versioning in the path, and it should start with V1, V2, etc. Like a tag, open API tag, which needs to be presented in the specification. Like kebab case, this is the big problem for Java developers, because if you start to create endpoint, like everything will be camel case, as you got used to. And in our case, we're using pre-commit hook. So it runs linting before you commit. So you even cannot commit that intentionally, unintentionally. Like if you want, you can run it with no verify, the git commit. But this is amazing. It prevents committing something which is not following standards. Multi-language client generation. This is another quite big thing. And just today I talked to our front-end developers, and not all of them are using generated TypeScript clients and DTOs. And it's quite amazing. So you don't need to manually, like if you're a front-end developer, you don't need to manually even go to OpenAPI YAML and change the path, check the path and check the DTO. You can just take the client which was generated. So how would you do it? Like if your client is in Java, how you would do it before? And here I'm being fancy. I'm using HTTP Exchange, which came with the latest Spring. I'm using record, and for the single V1 users endpoint, it's already quite a lot of code. Without that, so you manually do that, and with a new version, you probably need to go and check that and do that manually. With client generation, you can run this CLI command, provide YAML file, and then you will have type-safe client generated and the DTOs. And this is pretty amazing. Like you can use it without knowing that it goes through the REST, through the Jackson mapping and all that. Like that part is like completely removed from the code. Everything is type-safe and safe. Yeah, compile time validation, everything is consistent. Clients are versioned. So if you want to move to another version, you just change the version in your POM, and it's quite amazing. In our case, we have some services which are still on the Spring Boot 2, which doesn't support web client. So in our case, we generate two types of clients. One is a web client, another is a REST template. That also works quite easily, and for most of the developers, it's transparent. They don't even know that there is this complexity here. It's pretty simple to generate. You just do it once, and then it all works. This is for the web client, the similar config for the REST template. To use it, you just add a Maven dependency, and you have it. No need to think about paths, about the pagination, about anything like that. Everything is in Java. You can check Java doc. And in our case, we started by generating client in every repository. So we were generating server code, the interfaces, and the clients. But then recently, we decided why to do it in the repository. We can create another repository, API clients. And the way it works, we have a GitHub action, which goes through all our services, takes OpenAPI YAML specification, puts it in this repository, and then we generate clients for all our endpoints, for all our APIs. And it's like a single source of clients. We have Java, Swift, and TypeScript. Another huge benefit of that is having documentation hub. So previously, like you have a service and you don't know where to host your OpenAPI YAML specification. And from the previous step, we have a repository where we have all the specification in one place. And then if you put one of these tools, we're using BumpSH, it will go and create a documentation hub from all the services you have because they're in the same place. And it's a web-based, depending on the tool you're using, it's a web-based hub for all your endpoints and all your documentation. That's pretty cool. Some of them allows you to even test them, like providing test credentials. You can just call the endpoint from the web application and see the response and all that. That's pretty cool. This is another thing which we discovered recently, because we have technical writers, we have some public endpoints, and we want to prepare release notes for those, for all the new releases. And previously that was done manually. So when you change some public endpoint, you need to go to the technical writer, create a Jira ticket and tell them, look, we're releasing something new. And sometimes we forgot that. But here in GitHub, the same for GitLab, you have a code owners file. You can provide who is responsible for this code. So you can tag a GitHub team or dedicated person. And that works pretty well. So it's like absolutely automated process, no Jira tickets, nothing. The person will become a reviewer of that. And then you can set up GitHub to wait for person's approval. So no manual coordination. They know about changes early. You can even generate automatic release notes with the help of LLM. You can notify your front-end developers, for example, if you're releasing something. And it's language agnostic, so it doesn't really matter what you have on the backend. It doesn't really matter what you have on the front end. If you want, you can migrate backend language. I don't know why, but actually in our case, we had to do it. My squad, we inherited Go service, so we had like around 8 Java services and then 1 Go service. For some reason, somebody just decided to write it, and then we were supporting it for some time, and that was pretty hard because we don't have Go experience. And then the challenge was we need to migrate it to Java, and since we had OpenAPI specification, which in our case we were happy that was up to date, so we just needed to implement the interfaces, generate the interfaces, implement them, and we knew that we didn't break the contract. That was the most important part, and that was pretty simple comparing to if you just have a Go service and then you need to reverse engineer what data it provides, what are the endpoints. With this one, that was pretty easy to do. and we didn't have any issues with that. This is another like future-proof benefit, is like OpenAPI specification is just a text file. It's not explicit as JSON. YAML is not that explicit, like for arrays and for doesn't have that many duplication as JSON. And there are multiple ways how we can use it. One thing is, as you remember, we have one repository which has all the specs of all our endpoints. So what you can do, you can start Claude Code there and start to design right from there to be consistent. Like how to name parameters there, how to name paths, how to, for example, how to archive a user, like to have it standard, because LLM will index that and it will know like how it's usually done. So that's pretty helpful. And another thing, which is we discovered it maybe like few weeks ago. We're building AI agents, and one of them is the reporting agent. So basically, it's a AI chatbot which allows to answer user questions, user prompts about how business is going, like how many sales they did in the last week. And initially, we started as you just drop all the endpoints you have as an MCP tool, and then MCP server, based on the user prompt, it will find the proper MCP tool and will call it, get all the data, and that was working. But that was working until we started to have more than 4 or 5 tools. Because after that, the LLM had problems because like excessive token usage, because you have too many tools, you have too many tool descriptions. It's a reporting, they're all similar, kind of. So for 10 APIs, it's 10 separate tools. In our case, we have much more than that, so it doesn't scale. And at that time, Anthropic wrote code execution with MCP document. So basically, instead of telling LLM to call MCP tool, you can ask LLM to create a code and then execute it on your side and just provide the information back to LLM. So in our case, since we already have all the OpenAPI specs, so in this case, user wants to see sales for beverages. On our side, we're not calling LLM, we use semantic search to find the endpoint for that particular sales for beverages. And then on our side, we find the endpoint. We get all the DTOs which are linked to that endpoint. And it's an OpenAPI spec with just one endpoint, pretty small. And then we return it back to LLM saying that write a code to call this endpoint and filter out everything which is irrelevant. So because also endpoints are quite heavy on the data, they return everything. And then the code just filters out all the unnecessary fields, executes in sandbox, and then we return data back to the LLM, to the agent. And then it just provides the data. So it's much less. We have fixed number of MCP of tools. It's in our case, it's 4. We can support natural language queries as before, and it's very token efficient. And again, like OpenAPI specs made it possible. We were just really lucky to discover it, that we can just do it for free. Another thing which is relatively small, but you can extend OpenAPI. You can provide this X- parameters, and then you can set up OpenAPI code generator, whatever you want. You can provide some custom annotations, and like basically it's a free text. It's a mustache template. That's also pretty useful. Yeah. So now we talked about how good it is and why it's good, but then the problem is why don't everybody's using that? And I worked in different companies. Like in one company, we were using manual documentation, so developers were creating manual documentation. And the way to solve the problem with like broken contract, we had QA developers who were writing Python tests to call an endpoint and verify with OpenAPI YAML. So that was like many people working on something which can be just achieved for free. And I think the problem here, like how to adopt it, like how to do it. And what is important to mention is it really matters what structure you have. Because like if you work in a company like with a lot of developers, one person cannot do it because you need to sell this idea to everybody. It's a common, it becomes like a common standard of work. And organization-wide adoption is quite important. Everybody should know that, everybody should follow that, and everybody should know that it's pretty cool to use. And I think there are 3 ways how it can be achieved. What worked in our, we tried, from my experience, when I joined, we didn't have design first. We were trying Guild for some time, and that didn't work. We created some tooling, but that just didn't work. Then some people started this pilot and scale just by one person. That also didn't work. We spent maybe 2-3 years on that. That was just on the side. And for some reason that just didn't work. But then eventually, like one approach which worked for us, and it works I think for big companies, is to have like a platform squad or DevX squad. So it's a dedicated team of developers who are main client is not product, it's developers. And how they did it, that was pretty straightforward. They had a PM who was responsible for that, and they built all the templates, pipeline, client generation, documentation, and they were adopting teams one by one. And eventually, like everybody moved, all the endpoints moved to design first. So there are lots of pros of that. So you have clear ownership, you know who is responsible for that. If some pipeline doesn't work, you know where to go, whom to ask. You have consistent standards. You always have somebody to support to fix the pipeline. But then the problem with that is that it requires dedicated headcount. Like you need at least 2 people to work on that. Not every company can have resources. And yeah, the next thing is Guild. So when you take one developer from squad and then they meet from time to time and they do it slowly on a side, that's very slow. And I think the problem with it is people at some point will start to lose motivation because it takes a lot of time, because you need to build lots of automations and you don't see that working like straight away. You need some time, some momentum. And then, yeah, but you don't need dedicated headcount. The ownership is shared, which might be like a good thing or a bad thing. Democratic decision making, it's also like somewhere in the middle. And it's much slower. You need a clear leader there. And yeah, it not always work. And the last one, I think it works for small organization, but depending on like how dedicated you are. You just start with a pilot project with 2-3 services, slowly migrate them, and just show it to everybody, try to sell this idea, and then eventually it might work. People will start to adopt that. But what every approach needs is like technical foundation, all the tooling, all the templates, all the CI validation, all that, and then people. Like you need to have involvement, you need to sell this idea to people that it's really amazing, there are lots of benefits. Some of them will come later, like in our case. We discovered some of the benefits just recently. Yeah. So in our case, what worked well is definitely the platform squad. They still support that. It still works pretty well. We have project templates. This is quite important. When you start a new service, you don't need to think about like how to set up this API design first. We have a template where it already works out of the box. API review is part of the process, and it's very important. Like we pay a lot of attention to the APIs. All our APIs are standard. This is this has really worked well. Yeah, but we had a problem with that. Like one squad, distant squad in Australia started to work on a new service, and they just somehow they didn't know that we have this design first approach. They created specification, but they didn't use interfaces in the controllers. So they just created controllers, they put annotations there for some reason, and then they released that. That somehow slipped, and we still have this service that happened recently. We still have this service which has documentation, and we don't know if it's aligned with the code or not. I think the problem was that they just missed that somehow, so maybe that wasn't properly documented. The naming convention, yeah, we didn't use Spectral for linting and validating of OpenAPI from the beginning, and then some endpoints started to be like out of, not consistent. So it's something which should be set up also in the very beginning. Yeah, and key takeaway, there are 3 stages, and I think you should always aim for the design API first, because it has lots of benefits. And like single source of truth is just 3 words, 4 words, but it's a lot of great benefits coming from it. The parallel development, it's also life-changing for a company. Breaking changes prevention, that's also quite important if you have public endpoints. Client generation, we're still discovering benefits of it because we have quite a lot of clients, internal clients of our APIs, and not all of them aware that we have it. It's AI ready, so it's like text-based, LLM can understand it. Yeah, and that's it. If you have any questions, just can ask now or later. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay. You said like a couple of slides ago that you still had like one old service, which were kind of like done at the beginning of this, where you still don't know if the API matches the contract. I don't know, like if you heard about that thing. That's called, if I remember correctly, contract-based. Something that's called contract-based testing, where let's say you have your controllers, and your controllers, hopefully, they have tests. And the idea is that you had a layer to do controller tests, making sure that, hey, does my test make a query that breaks the API contract? And that's kind of like one way you can more or less ensure that it's not like drifting away from what's written on that documentation.
Well, for the existing services, we don't need that because we know that it follows the contract because the DTO were generated. For this one service, we don't have that, and we just currently manually, slowly. It's a public endpoint. That's the problem. We have clients who already use it, so now we just manually, slowly migrating it to V2, which is quite painful. This is fake.
Does it work?
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Question. So, like, you extend your API a little bit more like simple one, CRUD-based. So basically, you do simple operations. Do you generate these specs by LLM, or have you tried, like, to say, here's data model, here's my conventions, go, and it generates a skeleton spec for you. When you can iterate over, but basically have a good start from the beginning.
Who will generate it?
With LLMs. The open API specs themselves. Do you generate them or like tried? Thank you.
Yeah, the question was, do we generate open API specs with LLM? Yeah, sometimes we do. And since, again, we have a repository where we have all the specs of all our endpoints, so that's pretty standard. Like, yeah, you can just ask LLM, like, here's all the examples, let's generate one. Yeah, we do that. Yeah.
It's more of an organizational question. Are you responsible for the platform? How did you sell to the management in this case? Let's say you have a lot of first based API and decide to switch to the design first. So obviously you have to build a team, build the pipeline, transfer you have an initial investment. How did you convince the management that it's the right decision?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we have, from my experience, I think at Lightspeed Hospitality, we have this really good technical culture. And everybody, when I joined, there were already talks about like moving to API first, design first. And it was something which people wanted to do already, like some people, but that just didn't work. So I don't think we needed to sell it. I think eventually when we started to have this platform squad, we were just lucky that that thing was like in the air for quite some time. Yeah. And then the reason to go to design first, like one thing, we wanted to have documentation hub for clients, for integrators. And that already was something like everybody were talking about. And then we had few failed projects about that. And then platform squad appeared and they wanted to start with something. So in our case, we didn't need to sell it. Yeah.
Yeah, first thing first, amazing documentation through the approach is very good. Yeah, this or what should I do? Question: did I understand correctly that you've learned a repository that has a documentation for all of your services, and you contribute to this repository first, you design the API, and then it goes into documentation?
No.
No, the other way around.
The other way, yeah.
So when you design the API, you commit this documentation, right? Somewhere the API specs, so it goes. Then I'm wondering what is your process when it design already, the API already designed but not yet implemented. So how do you reflect this implemented state when you want this API to be eventually available, but it's still under development mode? Do you mark the endpoints on the API spec somehow, or do you use the branches? What's the approach?
We don't publish it.
With email, if you give it somewhere internally available, right? How do you reflect that this will be available, but not yet?
In the spec. So one thing, we have GitHub action, which pushes the API specification to the repository.
And okay, it's pushed, right? But surely API not implemented yet, right? So it's not available.
Yeah, another thing, the cool thing is that we have these custom flags, like vendor extensions in OpenAPI, like X-. So we mark them with, we have public, internal, and in progress.
That's it.
So if it's in progress, we don't publish it anywhere, and then we change it to internal or public.
Did you have the ability to use share the OpenAPI specification between the APIs? Because you can link like specific TCO between for like custom errors and stuff like that.
No, we don't do that. For the moment, we just copy pasting the error DTOs, but it's something probably we should improve. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Hello, sorry. Bonsoir, or bonjour. I have one thing to say. Bonjour tout le monde. Désolé d'avance pour m'offenser et les impressions bêtes. Okay, I'll do better next time. All right, thank you very much. The only thing that, my name is Bruno. The only thing that I have in common with Quebec is that I live in Canada. Because I was in Vancouver and I moved to Montreal 35 days ago. So I'm still learning. I already know how to curse the potholes, and I think that's a passion that we all have in common already. That's good. I work at Microsoft since 2018, and that's when I moved to Canada. I was in the US working for Oracle, then I moved to Canada, started my job at Microsoft. 35 days ago, my family and we moved to Montreal. We got tired of the cloudy sky of Vancouver. Like 80 days of rain, enough. So that's why we're here. This talk is about GitHub Copilot CLI. So raise your hand if you use GitHub. All right, awesome. Great to have that in common. Raise your hand if you use GitHub Copilot. Okay, so raise your hand if you use GitHub Copilot CLI. Okay, even less. Let's change that. Because the reality is, if you are using GitHub Copilot, you have access to the Copilot CLI. Because if you have access to GitHub Copilot Pro or etc., you have access to GitHub Copilot anywhere. And when I say anywhere, I mean literally anywhere. You can use GitHub Copilot on github.com. You can use inside Visual Studio Code. You can use inside now Eclipse, IntelliJ, and Xcode. Now you have the CLI integration with a bunch of solutions out there. Slack and Teams have integration with GitHub and GitHub Copilot. And other things coming soon eventually, like Azure DevOps, Linear, Jira, and so on. Anything that allows plugins, most likely there will be a GitHub Copilot for that, either built by Microsoft or by the companies that want to allow their customers to bring in their GitHub Copilot experience into their platform. Today we're going to talk primarily about Copilot CLI. And if you're using Cloud Code, for example, or Gemini CLI, the idea is the same. You have this agentic experience inside your terminal. And you're not saying that you have to give away your IDE. In fact, I use a lot the CLI plus the IDE. So then I can have things running in the background, making changes in my project. Sometimes I have a copy of the same project. You know, when you do git clone and then you have a folder in your local system, sometimes I have multiple folders for the same project. So I have different agents doing different things and then pushing pull requests to my GitHub repo. And then I can review those things later. Or I can do those diffs locally as well. You can also use the github.com Copilot agent on remote agents to do those things, like doing pull requests for different ideas and different tasks. Installation is simple. You do whatever package manager you prefer. There's also a way to download the package with curl. There are some MCP tools, but as we saw, MCP is kind of, there is a discussion. We could have a whole session here about skills versus MCP. And that's a whole other topic. MCPs do take a lot of context. They spend a lot of tokens just to have an understanding of all the tools available in the MCP server. And then if you have too many MCP servers, then you bloat your context window. Skills are much lighter because it's just like a header in a markdown file to give the minimum understanding for the LLM of what that skill is capable of. But there are support for MCP, of course, and also skills. A bunch of configurations that you can do in the CLI. There's one configuration that I love. It's called YOLO. And it's Copilot -- YOLO. If you do that, you're basically telling Copilot CLI, okay, you have permission to do anything. Don't do it. Do it in a sandbox, inside a container, inside a VM. Do in a place that it's safe if the agent decides, you know, the best way to get rid of all the bugs is to delete the whole software. And there's an episode in Silicon Valley about that. So from like 7 years ago, even before LLMs were a thing. So there is this option, YOLO. Here are some of the common commands that we can play with. Custom agents, you can just work on a plan, nothing will be executed. You can change the model. Again, if you have GitHub Copilot, you have access to all the models. Have access to Sonnet, Opus, GPT, Gemini, and even local models. You can also bring your own models if you want to. And then the /delegate, which is cool, because, okay, here's a task that I want to do in this repo, but you know what? I'm going to delegate to the Copilot agent in github.com. Bunch more commands that we can do. @ for mentioning files, that's very useful. Most likely you can just go to this file, // or whatever path, and then the agent will kind of figure it out. But if you really want to make it sure, maybe you have multiple files with the same name in your project structure, then the @ will give you the exact reference. You can resume sessions. That's really cool. You do something and you finish. You know what? I'm going to try again, but I'm going to make some changes, and then you accidentally close the terminal. You can resume that session. So there's a lot of things that we can do with GitHub Copilot. One thing that I love about this chart is see how coding is bigger and architecture and documentation is smaller. I would say it's actually the other way around these days. We are becoming more and more architects of software with coding agents than coders by definition. So writing documentation specifications is actually more important for us as software engineers. And honestly, it has always been the case, right? But we also had to write the code, and it was much cooler writing the code than documentation. So that's why we spent more time in that. But with these days, I think documentation should be now the bigger word in this chart here. Okay, enough with slides. I want to talk about another thing that the Copilot CLI enables us to do. Recently, last week, GitHub announced the Copilot SDK. So the Copilot SDK is it's a programming interface. Officially by GitHub, it has support for Node, Python, Go, and .NET. There is Java support, but it's an unofficial SDK. But the idea of this SDK is to give developers a programmable interface to interact with Copilot CLI. Sure, you can write shell scripts. Sure, you can create applications that will execute the Copilot CLI, but that is not the best way to do it if you want to orchestrate and program the Copilot agent. Because in reality, behind the scenes, the Copilot CLI actually runs as a server. The terminal UI is just an interface, just a front end for that Copilot server running on your machine. And that's what the SDK connects with. So the Copilot SDK talks to the Copilot CLI server to interact with the agents, the sessions, the events, and everything. And that allows us to do really cool stuff. So if you want to see how the Copilot CLI SDK works, for Java at least, I did build the SDK. It's unofficial. I am a Microsoft employee. I have the GitHub hoodie, but this project that I wrote using Copilot is not official. So I'll just make that clear. But it is MIT license, so you're free to use. There's no commercial anything. So here's an example of the code. Okay, I'm going to create a new Copilot client, which will, start a session. Start a connection with Copilot CLI. If Copilot CLI is not running, it will start the server in here. And then I'm starting a session. In this session, I'm going to use the model Sonnet 4.5. There is an API to list the available models. Zoom in. Okay. So there is an API for listing the models, but here we already know one of them. Okay, we're going to use Sonnet 4.5. And then I'm going to just create a completable future here to get the event when it's done. And then I'm going to set a listener for when there is a message coming from the CLI, from the Copilot CLI server. And then I'm going to send a message to this agent. I'm going to say, hey, what is 2 plus 2? And then get that information, and that's it. I'm going to print the content of that message when the message arrives. So I'm programming that communication with Copilot CLI server. What does this allow me to do, other than, of course, sending a prompt and getting a message? I mean, that is quite obvious. I can do that with any AI model with a REST endpoint. One cool thing that I did as an experiment was the JMeter plugin. Okay, where are you? Damn. Oh no. Okay. Quickly, what is the shortcut to disable Zoom on Mac? Anybody knows? What?
Add command 8, I think.
Command 8.
No, it's killing. No, it's the native Zoom of Mac. And
Where are you? Oh. Oh, yeah.
there you go. Okay, thank you for the. Thank you. Somebody screamed 3 fingers. Okay, do it. All right. So to experiment with the SDK, I did this thing here with JMeter. Anybody familiar with JMeter? Okay, if you're not familiar with JMeter, it's a load testing tool. You can do a load testing with JMS, HTTP, whatever, files, whatever you're going to load test. And here we have a test that that got generated. How did this get generated? Well, I created a plugin. So here we can see the Copilot chat plugin written in Java Swing, which is an actual plugin for JMeter. All I did was I went into the Copilot CLI and I said, hey, let's build a Copilot chat experience for JMeter as a plugin for JMeter. And how are we going to communicate? We're going to use the Copilot SDK. And it implemented this UI. Okay, I'm going to use Opus 4.5. And now I'm going to say, you know what? Test the my prompt here initially was give me a test plan for the URL, JSON placeholder, whatever, with 5 parallel users and 20 requests per second each for 30 seconds. If you have ever designed a test plan on JMeter, you know how annoying it is to configure the elements in a JMeter test plan. But with a natural language, it became a lot easier. Okay, so not only, but Bruno, I can just go into ChatGPT and ask to generate the plan. Yes, you can do that. And then you download the file, you put on your file system, and then you open JMeter, and then you open the file. What I did here was, okay, you know what? Give me a show XML button, and then also a button to load test into the GUI right away, because it's the Java SDK connecting the same Java application. So just call the API that loads the XML file, right? So when I click here, I get this, or I get the XML, which I can review. So this got generated by Copilot. And then I can say, okay, load the test plan. And then boom, I have the test plan loaded here. Okay, well, what about the number of users, etc.? Well, here's the URL. It broke the URL into its value important fields. And then the path. And then it created the thread group with 5 users, which was the request that I gave, right? So really cool use case for the SDK, using a very outdated but still super useful tool, JMeter, right? So this is Copilot SDK. But how how did I implement the Copilot SDK itself? Well, everything was done through the CLI. So what I'm going to do here is just kill JMeter, and let's get into the CLI. So here's the CLI. Okay, there's a bunch of files. You would be surprised that I wrote zero. There is not a single file that I wrote entirely by myself in this project. Not a single file. Some files I did intervene during the process. You know what? Let's not do it this way. Let's do it that way. But the most important file here, once I implemented the Copilot, by the way, to implement the initial Copilot SDK was, hey, go look into the official SDKs. Understand how the official SDKs work. And then implement a Java version of that, of the Copilot SDK. And it did, just fine. And then I realized, oh, I actually need to keep this project in sync. Where am I? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so let's open this on Visual Studio Code just to see how this looks like from a more open recent Copilot SDK. Okay. So in here, there are some files that I need that are not meant to be here. They are work in progress. Otherwise, this will confuse the agent. All right, so once it generated the project, my next step was, okay, how do I keep this SDK in sync with the official SDKs? So now the official SDKs are adding new features, and I want to, bring those features into. I don't want to look into those features. So my thinking process was like, okay, I'm going to actually keep a file in my repo called last merge. This is the hash of the official. This is the commit hash of the official SDK repo from the last time that I synced with it. Okay. What now? Now I'm going to actually use a prompt that will say, you know what? You are an expert Java developer tasked with porting changes from the official Copilot SDK to this Java SDK. There are some rules. Okay, let's prioritize Java architecture, Java design principles, etc., etc. Here's the workflow overview. Create a new branch from main, clone the upstream repository, and analyze a diff since the last merge. And then it will get the commit hash from that file. And then it will run the diff, and then apply the changes. And then commit into a branch so I can do a pull request review manually as a human. Then that part I will look into it. So how do I trigger this thing? I can trigger this thing in many ways. Because this is a prompt file here, .github/prompts, I can do this in the Copilot chat, agentic merge upstream. There is this option. Or I can do in the CLI. I can just say, oh, by the way, this is the agentic. And it found the prompt. Here's the prompt. But why do I have also skills for this? Because we are living in a world where things are moving too fast and nobody likes the standards. So that's why Claude has a standard, GitHub has another standard, and Gemini, whatever, ChatGPT, they have their own standards. So what I did for the skill was pretty simple. I went to the Claude skill and the GitHub Copilot CLI skill, and I said, hey, when I trigger the Claude skill, go look into the prompt file. That's what this skill does. Right, so I just maintain one actual file with the workflow instructions. Okay, so forget about the file. Let's do / agentic merge upstream. And then boom. So now I trigger that skill that will reference that prompt that will execute that workflow. It will clone the official SDK, load a diff since that last commit, understand what changed, and apply those changes into my Java SDK. And ultimately commit those changes in a new branch and push that branch to my remote repo so I can do a pull request view. So other developers on the unofficial SDK can review and approve. Now for this demo, I should have used the YOLO flag, but I forgot. So that's why I need to hit enter all the time. So it got the last merge commit, you see? Now it's gonna do the diff, understand what happened, etc. While it's doing that, here's another thing that I did while the other presenter was delivering their talk. There was an issue with the JMeter plugin. The JMeter plugin had an issue because it was using an older version of the Copilot Java SDK. So what I did while I was sitting there, I went to the repo from my phone and I created this issue, update to Copilot SDK 104. This is literally what I said, just the title. And then I assigned the issue to Copilot, the Claude agent. And then Copilot created a pull request. Okay, here's what I'm gonna change. I'm gonna change the POM file. And that's it. So I didn't have to modify the file, just create the issue and Copilot does the change for me. I review and I merge. If you look at the conversation here, how did this work? There was an initial plan. I assigned Copilot. Copilot started working on my behalf, and this is the session. So you can actually see everything that the Cloud Copilot agent was doing. Okay, it reviewed a bunch of files, etc. Okay, oh yeah, sounds like all I need to do is change the POM file and run tests. It did build the project and it did run the Maven tests. And excellent, CodeQL works, everything's fine. Okay, boom, that's it, right? So that's how I released a new version of the JMeter plugin for that. Now, my instructions for this keeping in sync with official SDK, because C# and Java are quite similar in terms of programming language, that's my reference implementation of the official SDK by maintaining the Java SDK. So it will focus on the .NET implementation of the official SDK, but I did ask, hey, also look into the Node implementation just in case there are features in Node that may have not been ported into the .NET yet. Because maybe one day the Java SDK is ahead of the .NET for a few days. Okay, so here's the analysis. There is a documentation change. Some changes in GitHub workflows. Some Python changes. The .NET doc fix is already handled in Java. The Python SDK changes are very Python specific. The workflow changes don't affect the Java SDK code. So sounds like nothing has changed since the last merge. So now what's gonna do is, okay, I did merge, already reviewed all those commits. I don't want to review those commits again. So what I'm gonna do is save the latest hash into that last merge file and push that change to the project. Yes, and approve. This part will take a while because it will actually run all the tasks in the project. So let's see what else we can talk about. I think that was it. You can of course run the Copilot CLI from here, or you can just use the chat experience, which is very similar talking to the Copilot CLI. But again, like one of the nice things about the CLI is you don't have to have the IDE, you just have to have the CLI installed. Just like whatever environment you have access to, a remote environment maybe, you can have this agent working for you in a remote server. Making changes in production, who never did that? Now you just use an agentic AI to do that. Okay, so this is what I had. And while it's running the test, let's open up for questions. Thank you very much. Yeah, questions?
So you're running the Sonnet 4.5 or Opus 4.5 by default, and how do you optimize on credit usage and also on deployment? In other words, execution time, credits, execution time, and appropriateness. How do you optimize on that? I thought it was always MCP, but it's very good now that you're using Float. So explain that whole process. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the question was about the models, why I'm using Opus. The primary reason I'm using Opus here is because it is the best model at the moment for most coding tasks. But the second reason is because I'm a Microsoft employee, so I have unlimited requests. Okay. The real answer is GitHub Copilot has a pricing model that we call premium requests. So anything that you do will trigger a premium request. And that premium request, they have multipliers. So if you're using an expensive model like Opus, you have like a 3 times multiplier for a premium request. But if you're using a cheaper model, you have a divider, like 0.3 times multiplier, which makes it cheaper to use that model. So the pricing is not necessarily based on amount of tokens. It's a number of premium requests. And then you have the multiplier based on the model that you selected for the execution of that request. And you can flip between models. Yeah, there is a model called Auto. So you can see it here on Visual Studio Code. So you have Auto. So Auto will apply a 10% discount on premium requests. So if for some reason the Auto model selector selects Opus, it's going to be a 2.7 multiplier because it's a 10% discount, right? But if it selects, let's say, Gemini, it's a 0.9 multiplier because it's a 10%. Or you can select the exact model that you want, and then you have these multipliers here. But you can see that Opus is the most expensive at the moment. It's 3 times. Yeah.
So the Copilot CLI, what kind of analytics does it provide for enterprise users? Like, can I see what prompts my developers use during the day? Can I see how many comments per code, how many skills involved?
Okay, that's so the question was about telemetry for enterprise. So who's paying the bill? Can they see what developers are doing? Okay, the answer that I have right now is I don't know. Okay, but I'm sure we can go on, spend 2 minutes on github.com and maybe get an answer, or maybe not, right? But that's a great question. I'll take note of that. Yeah. Okay, so just to...
Is it logged in the Elasticstack?
What?
Isn't it logged in the Elasticstack so you can actually...
But I do not know. I do not know if the telemetry is logged in an Elastic stack. Yeah. One thing that we did released recently that was super cool. Oh, by the way, here's the pull request created for that branch. So if we click here, so here's the summary, right? No applicable changes to the Java SDK based on what it saw in the .NET and even Python SDKs, but it did update the last merge file and created a pull request. So let's look into that. Here's the branch, merge upstream. So I'm going to create a pull request here and merge this change because I want to keep my repo in sync with upstream. And then delete branch. Okay, cool. All right. I could have asked the agent on my local machine to just go and commit into the main branch, but I don't want that. I want to have the different branches for review purposes. So what was I going to say before that? So the question was about telemetry. Yes, so going back into that, one cool thing that we did recently was this command called share. So all these session and this conversation that I had with the agent, I can go and create a file that shares all these sessions prompts into a file. So I can share this flow with other developers. Because now in developer community is like, okay, what prompt did you use? Can you share me your prompt? Well, now there is a slash share. So you can say, you can point to a file or you can do actually gist, and it will share this session into a gist on your GitHub account. And by design, it will create a private gist for that session, right? If you want to share with somebody, share the link privately so it doesn't appear on your public gists in your GitHub account. But this was it. So, okay, this is the session. It started with the slash agentic merge upstream. And then in the end, here's the summary. Okay, this is the summary of the upstream change analysis and the link to the PR. It's very, very useful when you want to see what happened and share with others. It doesn't give you the telemetry that you ask about, but it is something. Once you do leave, there's a bunch of other commands here that you can think about, like agent clear, compact, context, show context window token usage and visualization. Okay, so let's look into this. So for this session so far, I have used 43,000 tokens with 23,000 of messages, 40,000 buffer. Still far from using the entire context window for this merge operation. Is this useful?
Yeah, but there's no link with number of premium requests in there.
It doesn't show the number of premium requests. Yeah, that is a common feedback. I actually don't know if there is a command that will share that. I don't think it does. Yeah, just me. No, but if I do exit, okay, because I saw this earlier, it will tell you how many premium requests it used. Okay, after you leave the session. I don't know if there is a way to see this information from within the session.
I thought there was a slash thing.
Slash what?
Slash thing.
Slash usage? Let's look into that.
Why say estimated premium request? It should be exactly. Why say estimated?
It's a great question. I don't know. There's a lot of questions that I would not know the answer. Yeah. No, fair point. Hello. And then, hello, how are you? And then usage. Okay. Bye-bye.
Good thing you're unlimited.
Goodbye. Usage. See, it's better to actually do useful work like merging an SDK than talking to AI. It's a lot cheaper. I'm sorry, what? It's the multiplier. Maybe, yeah, let's model Let's do Sonnet 4. Low again.
Okay, you proved your point.
Okay, 7. All right. Thank you. You should work at GitHub in the sales department. All right. Folks, thank you so much for your time. I hope this was fun and informative. If you have further questions, want to talk to me in person, I live in the island. I'm not too far away. And sorry for the folks that live outside the island. I guess that was a bad joke. But I'm super available. Ken, another Java champion here in the community, and we'll be around for sure. So if you have any questions, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, social media, whatever, feel free. I'm super open to that. All right. Thank you very much.
So how does work? The quiz, you need to scan this yet another QR code. Okay, so I can see that right now there are 25 of you. You're more than this. Hey, by the way, waiting for that, Bruno, I had a question for you actually. I just learned today about Claude Code, but Claude with C-L-A-W, which has been renamed to Mortmo. Sorry, Mort what?
Multiple.
Yeah, Mortbot, that's right, thank you. Anyways, this thing, Mortbot, is basically they're using Codex and the other one, Claude, to actually chat on your behalf. So basically it integrates well with WhatsApp, iMessages and whatnot. And now, this evening, during your demo, you were showing to us how you could write a plugin for JRailer. Anyways, from a high-level perspective, I'm wondering what's going to be like the winning technology. Like, is it going to be like we're going to extend tools to access LLMs like you have with Copilot SDK? Or is it the other way around, that you're going to have smart tools that know how to integrate with existing tools? I mean, smart AI-based tools that knows how to integrate with existing tools. What is your take on this?
Sure, yeah, I think, so my personal opinion on this, not an endorse for Microsoft opinion at all. My personal opinion on this is, for, I would say, the next 5 years, we're going to be in a transition. We already passed the point that we can do software without AI. Stack Overflow is dead. Google search, no longer relevant. Just use AI now. LLMs are great for coding. So I think it's a great question on, do we use LLM to write code, or do we write agents to write code, right?
Yeah.
So there is this trend now of agentic orchestration of agents to write code for us, right? But I think for greenfield applications, brand new applications, this is amazing. But 95% of the world runs on Microsoft applications. So I think personally that we as software developers will still stay in the loop for many years because of the legacy of the software stack in the world. And I've seen LLMs modernizing code, and there is a big difference between modernizing to the latest version of a dependency. You know, when I use the latest Log4j or when I use the latest Java, or when I use LLM to modernize my code. That works fine. But what about, you know, the system that does passenger control in the airport? You don't want to just tell the LLM, hey, go modernize this whole thing. I think that's a lot more critical. And most of the software in the world is very critical. So yeah, I think it's a balance right now. It's a transition point. Do we use AI to write code, or do we use AI to write AI to write code? Right? And I think we're still learning how to orchestrate agentic developers. So that's why projects like Claude, whatever.
Moltbot, yeah.
There are a bunch of projects like that. Rod Johnson, the creator of Spring, has a framework called Babel for creating agents.
He's going to do a keynote at Dev Nexus, right?
Yes, Rod Johnson will get that.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of these frameworks for writing agents, and then there's also frameworks for orchestrate agents. I saw this cool demo that I got did with a 3D animation of his agentic AI developers in a 3D animation doing stuff.
Okay.
So I don't know. The answer of the final answer is I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe we are past the point of not using AI for software engineering.
Okay.
The question now is, what is the best way to use it?
Yep.
What is the safest way to use it so we can keep legacy systems up and running while building new systems?
Gotcha. Merci, thank you. Okay, so you had ample time to scan this QR code, so let's get started without further ado. So in the next screen, you will have the opportunity to put your name, I think. So yeah, choose your name. I mean, you can choose whatever you want, but just make sure you remember it. That's okay. Okay, let's get started. The faster you answer, the more points you get. What is the first sentence when you open our link tree? Haha. Next meetup, 28th janvier 2026. Oh, I kind of helped you. Happy New Year 2026 or Bonne année 2026. Oh. As I can see, you didn't scan the QR code. See, you're getting punished. Oh, that's the way it is. All right, but you can still get more points during the next questions. Okay, second question. Oh no, Pavel introduced a node package for mock server. Which one? Prism CLI, Lightspeed / Express CSP middleware, or Express? Yes, he used Prism CLI. Good job. By the way, Pavel, next time you will use a Java-based software, right, for your demo. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine. We don't judge. Interesting. Nothing is done yet. Okay, next question. MCP is trendy, but Pavel had issues with it. How did he fix them? Did he use RAG and some context window tools? Or did he use MCP code execution? Yes, he used MCP code execution indeed. Ah, we lost the wolf apparently. Ah. All right, how many questions remaining now? Okay, this is before the last. Ready? Bruno created an integration of the Copilot SDK in a performance tool. Which one? LoadRunner, Gatling, or Apache JMailer? Oh, okay. All right. I was fast, but I think that most of you got the answer. Oh, yeah. But didn't change much the ranking, actually. Okay, last question. Bruno used a file to teach actions to Copilot. Which one? You have to be fast. Agents.md, skill.md, readme.md. Yeah, he used skill.md. And if you don't agree with my answers, just know that I am the truth. So. Ok, oui, Stéphane Levray. Bravo, félicitations. Est-ce que tu veux ta licence IntelliJ? Excellent, c'est bon. Et ensuite, on a Anthony. Alors, ça peut pas être moi. Ok, c'est toi. Salut. Est-ce que tu veux ta licence? Excellent, bravo, félicitations. Et puis on se voit en février, le 24 février chez Kung Fu. Merci, salut.